Hello, everyone. Welcome again to another Teacher Joseph podcast. This week, we've been looking at the TV license and how that's enforced in the country. Now, there's a news report here, which is very, very long, from The Guardian from back in February, which gives some very harrowing and difficult stories about exactly how these TV license enforcement officers behave and how the department in general behaves when it comes to punishing people. There's a few people here in this article who aren't British who are saying that they have no idea what happened. They were just sitting at home one day watching TV. Someone knocked on their door. Next thing they knew, they received a huge penalty. They were given the chance to buy a TV license. They didn't do that. They promised they would set up a direct debit. One payment was taken, and they didn't pay it after that. And of course, immediately they received a fine of £1,000. This story here, we're going to read parts of it. TV licensing's prosecutions have targeted some really vulnerable people. One man was in hospital for 11 weeks. He renewed his license as soon as he was discharged. He was prosecuted 6 days later for not renewing it on time. One woman with a brain injury was prosecuted when she forgot to pay. And the court system apparently recognizes that non-payment of the TV license is now the most common crime in the UK after driving offences. 1,000 people a week are penalised and are issued with criminal sentencing, and 70% of those are women. The court now has adopted a streamlined procedure for dealing with these. So you no longer go to court in front of 2 or 3 people and then you kind of like sit in front of the judge and they're found guilty or not guilty. The court, since COVID time, does it all for you. You don't even get to present evidence. Everything is just passed to the court and the court says, okay, yeah, you did it, here's the fine, thank you very much, or you can go to prison. So you don't get to defend yourself, or you don't get to have any say in what happens. It says here, once upon a time, the TV licensing people would have considered mental health problems, learning disabilities, illnesses, etc., as acceptable excuses for delays, but these are now only seen by the courts, who cannot withdraw the case. They could refer it to another court, but largely they don't, so you have no way of defending yourself. You just get punished. A TV licensing spokesperson said, "We don't prosecute people if we know there are reasons, such as mental health issues or severe financial hardships." But clearly they do, though, according to this newspaper's story. And there's a very disturbing story here about a woman who is so badly mentally disabled that the government looked after her finances, because, we don't trust family with these kind of things. So she was so mentally disabled that all of her finances were looked after by the government. And the TV licensing people actually took the government to court because they hadn't looked after her TV license. This is Greenwich Local Authority, Greenwich Council, they pleaded guilty. They said, yeah, sorry, it's all our fault. We manage your finances. And so it just goes to show the power these people have. And then it goes on just to reiterate what it said earlier, that 1,000 people a week, 70% of them are women, receive criminal records because they don't pay their TV license. It is the most common crime in the country, apart from driving offences. A fifth of all criminal prosecutions in the country brought against women are for TV licensing offences. TV license officers can search your property. They need to have a warrant from the court to do it, but they can do it. Doorstep interrogation. They have a right to challenge you if you say you don't have a TV. You need to prove to them that you only have a monitor and that you're only watching streaming services, not including BBC iPlayer. It gets very complicated. There's a woman here called Tara Casey who's involved with the Women's Justice Initiative, and she says it's getting worse. The gender disparity, the fact that mostly women are prosecuted, it was so obvious that the BBC did their own investigation to make sure that they weren't being biased by going after so many women. I mean, it's not really their responsibility. The license fee pays for them, but it's the government, isn't it? There's also a blog which is trying to uncover the disparities of the TV licensing system. And it says, those on lower incomes, unemployed people, single parents, households, elderly people, etc., are more likely to be at home during the day if a TV licensing enforcement officer arrives. For that reason, they're more likely to be interviewed and face prosecution. 90% of single parents are women, and that is what explains the gender bias. Yeah, and in another case, one bit of evidence that was given for not having a TV license: I'm suffering from severe depression, it says. Since the loss of my daughter, I have no family or friends. Yeah, but you see, this is where things get difficult, because those are British social problems. So how far do we go? Do we say, okay, well, look, you don't need a TV license because you have depression? You know, it's a very difficult thing, that. But yeah, those kind of mental health issues are very common here. And getting a TV license is pretty low on the list when you think of all the other things. So if I was the government, I would simply move that tax and put it in with their general taxes, and then everyone would pay it anyway. So I don't know why they're so difficult about this. It says here, the government was planning to decriminalize license fee non-payment, so it couldn't go to court, but that was scrapped in 2021. The actual enforcement is looked after by a private company which is called Capita. It's a very famous finance company around the world. Individual TV licensing officers, according to this report in The Guardian, receive bonuses for any TV license sales they generate during their visits. They can only generate a sale and then earn a bonus if they take a statement from the occupier of a property which doesn't have a TV license. So there is an advantage for individual officers to gather evidence of evasion whenever they can, by hook or by crook. And that's a very popular idiom, which means in any way you can. If you do something by hook or by crook, it means you do it legally or illegally. By hook or by crook, that's very common here. Nice phrase, nice phrase. TV licensing denies that it has any incentive to prosecute. It says here, neither TV licensing as a whole nor individual visiting officers have any incentives to achieve a certain number of sales. Well, that's not what this newspaper is saying. There was a demonstration, lots of old people on the streets, because over 75s previously didn't have to pay the license. And the government, I think, let's see, free TV licenses for the over 75s were scrapped, meaning they now have to pay for it. Which sounds bizarre, doesn't it? I don't think that's true for all across the UK. I'd need to check on that. I think that's an English thing. It says here between 200,000 and 250,000 over 75s have not paid their fees since the free licenses were taken away. Yeah, so they were entitled to have their license free. Notice, by the way, they still need a license, but they get it free. Not anymore. Okay, that was in the past. So, but my point is this, they still needed that bit of paper. Whether they pay for it or not, it's not like they can say, oh, well, I'm over 75, I don't need a license. It's, I'm over 75, I get a license, but do I pay for it? And currently, yes. Let's see. What else? It says here, very long story. We're just going to jump over to this unofficial blog that exists. And this is the blog which I was telling you about a moment ago. And it's set up to basically give details about how this TV licensing system is very unfair. And this is a website called tv-licensing.blogspot.com. And it's quite frightening with the stories it says here. The stories it has here, yes. Let me just have a little look and see what it says. This is from September. TV licensing enforcement prosecutes a woman who's detained under the Mental Health Act. The 32-year-old woman had post-traumatic stress disorder and was messing up her finances, but it didn't matter because the TV license enforcement pressed on to prosecute her anyway. The newspaper, the Evening Standard, made a big fuss about it and wrote a story, and a TV licensing official eventually said they would look into it to see whether they could change it, but they probably wouldn't. Wow, yeah. The government is in talks once again, apparently, to decriminalize the BBC TV license. Good news if it's true, according to this blog, but they've said this before, it's probably not going to happen. And of course, the BBC has had a number of scandals. The more recent one is about a presenter, Hugh Edwards, who's currently in prison for sexual offences. And he's regarded as one of our most deviant broadcasters, along with Jimmy Savile, who was another man who unfortunately had a history of criminality. And these people were paid millions by the BBC. And so if we're paying the license fee to fund the BBC, it raises the question, well, if the BBC is employing criminals, surely something is very wrong. And this man, Hugh Edwards, as well as Jimmy Savile, went to prison, but he didn't pay back his salary that he received when he went on leave while the police were investigating his crimes. And so there's a big call for the BBC to take this man to court to get the money back from him that they were paying him while he was absent, before he was convicted. It's very complicated. And that call comes from the fact that through the TV license, we are paying for the BBC. So very complex, very complex. There's a copy of a TV license here that obviously it has people's details blacked out, and it's very, very interesting. It just shows what one looks like. And then there's also a communication here on this site, which is from the TV licensing agency, and it basically says, let me just read this for you. This is a communication from the TV licensing enforcement people. Important news about your no license needed status. Yeah, because when they write to you, you can tick a box and you can say, I don't need a license. This one says, our records show BBC iPlayer has been used. Dear Sir, Madam, we've previously been told that a TV license is not needed at XYZ address. However, our records show someone has used BBC iPlayer on a number of occasions over recent weeks, and it has the dates. The no license needed status of this address is now invalid and will soon be cancelled. Please get in touch before the 9th of April 24. You need a TV license to be covered for everything on BBC iPlayer. It also covers you for all channels and live streaming on devices. If you are already covered by a license or you think this is a mistake, please let us know immediately. Yours faithfully, Ross McTaggart. Oh, no relative. Nothing to do with me, even though he shares my surname. Customer Service Director. Oh, well, it sounds like a nice job, doesn't it? So it seems that this gets very confusing. So you need a license, but you get it free if you're over 75. If you prove to them that you only stream and don't have access to the BBC on a monitor, on a computer monitor, then you don't need anything, as long as you're prepared to prove that to two men, oh dear, who come to your house. It's very, very complex and detailed, isn't it? But hopefully that just gives you some kind of understanding of how bizarre the whole thing is. And these people, as you can imagine, if they really are earning commission from every time they force you to buy a TV license, and there's 1,000 people being prosecuted a week, someone somewhere is making quite a lot of money on this, I would say. But you don't want a couple of buffoons at your door trying to force you to buy one. It doesn't sound very nice. So there we are. Anyway, that's it from me this week, all about TV licensing. I'll be back tomorrow to give you more mundane topics. And I hope you've enjoyed this. And remember, if you are coming to the UK and you are renting a property here and you are going to have a TV, please, please get a license, because they will fine you. Yeah, what they do is they will target the property first of all, and then they have access to government records to find out who's living in that property. And before long, they'll have your name and address. And then when they realize that they have the name of the person in that property where there's a TV, they will then work to force you to pay. I mean, you can buy one anywhere, post office, local newsagent. Do it quarterly if you can't afford it. You know, pay it at £40 every few months. That's what I do. But please, please do get one, because it's one of our main areas of enforcement. So you can't run away from that. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. And yeah, I'll be back with my weekly lesson next week. And that will be all about Halloween. And our clocks change this weekend as well. So I'll be telling you about that in my weekly lesson too. And anyway, until tomorrow, have a lovely day. Bye.